Whether it is the azan, the early morning call to prayer for Muslims, chiming church bells, or meditative chants and recitation of mantras, Southeast Asia has it all. With a population of more than 600 million, it is ethnically and religiously the most diverse region in the world, with a myriad of languages, customs, and practices. Not only is Southeast Asia home to Chinese, Malays, Javanese, Dayak, Filipino, Khmer, Vietnamese, Indians, Thais, and Burmese, just to name a few, the region is also home to the world's major religions: Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, and Islam, as well as practitioners of other lesser-known faiths such as Baha'is, Jains, Jews, and Zoroastrians.
How amazing is that? So it comes as no surprise that the region has had its fair share of ethnic and religious conflict in the last decades. Welcome to ASEAN Spotlight. In this episode, we explore the diverse demographic makeup of ASEAN. What are the challenges of being so different but living as neighbors?
ASEAN is the fifth largest regional grouping in terms of population size. It was formed in 1967 to promote peace, stability, security, and shared prosperity in the region through mutual cooperation. Comprising Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. All 10 member nations are diverse in terms of their economies, cultures, languages, and religions. Despite the breadth of diversity in the region, the people of Southeast Asia have been living side by side, peacefully with each other for centuries. Only recently, in the last decades, has this peaceful coexistence been threatened and unsettled by radical ideas for homogenization.
This is because certain trends of thought have come to our societies in the ASEAN region, trends of thoughts which emphasize, or which we want to see, homogenization, uniformization, trends of thoughts that breed the kind of thinking that there is only one correct way, and in that sense you nullify this whole idea of the existence of diversity. And I think this is where, unfortunately, intolerance comes in. And I like to call it that a certain kind of fundamentalism, has emerged in the region that has affected our way of life, which had been inclusive and even pluralistic.
Besides fostering social integration and togetherness, the implications of religious and ethnic harmony for the continued growth and development of the economy of the region cannot be understated. Given its huge population and resources, ASEAN has the potential to be a global economic powerhouse. Collectively, ASEAN is the 7th largest economy in the world. However, the disparity across member nations and even within member nations is significantly wide.
While individual countries have to contend with such ethnic and even religious-inspired conflict, the region is facing another serious problem: the scourge of terrorism. It is threatening to shatter the fragile coexistence and efforts for the unity of religions in ASEAN.
The recent street bombings in central Jakarta, as well as the discovery of terrorist training camps and cell groups in various locations in the region, brings to the fore the severity of the problem facing ASEAN. However, the coming together of the residents of the Indonesian capital in response to the bombings underscored the importance of religious harmony and unity, as people of all backgrounds rallied in support of and solidarity with each other. Calls for unity across racial and religious lines are gradually being heard.
That incident happened in Paris can happen anywhere in the world. So we have to be really careful that we try to treat others as brothers and sisters and do not discriminate anyone. People, the leader should teach their followers really to build this nation as one lovable and as brothers and sisters as one family. So that's important.
Clearly, interfaith dialogue is one of the many pillars that we can put in place to ensure peace in this region. I cannot, and without, being presumptuous, say what other things we could do. But certainly, interfaith dialogue is definitely one of the pillars that is required to ensure that we have peace in this region.
While cooperation and dialogue between leaders of society are essential to set the tone for racial and religious harmony, ordinary citizens can also do their part. The integration of all segments of society in the common spaces is perhaps key to lasting peace and harmony in the region. After the break, we look at the reason why Singapore, one of the most religious diverse countries in the world, does not take peace for granted.
It is 2016 and multicultural Singapore is celebrated as a cultural haven rich with Chinese, Malay, Indian and many other cultural traditions. It is as ethnically, culturally and religiously diverse as it can get. Mosques, temples and churches can be found throughout the city-state, some even built right next door to each other. And people of various communities living and interacting closely with each other.
The secret sauce is our neighborhoods, the composition of the neighborhoods, and the way the neighborhoods are designed so as to maximize interaction and give us the best chance of achieving an integrated society. Give us the best chance. They're designed for that purpose.
So in this multiculturalism which we enjoy, there's a big difference for Singapore. We don't just allow ethnic communities just to coexist side by side, live and let live, but we do the integrationist type of multiculturalism. That means the state is very conscious that integration is primary. And therefore, within the embrace of multiculturalism, central to this is this whole idea of getting ethnic communities, to share common views, common values, common principles, and that in a way will unify people of diverse cultural backgrounds.
Singaporeans of different backgrounds can often be seen participating in each other's festivals and celebrating together. While the picture of Singapore today is considered by many to be the epitome or beacon of multiculturalism, the situation in the 1960s was a far cry from this.
On 21st July 1964, a procession was held to celebrate the birthday of Prophet Muhammad. The procession was to begin here at the Padang in front of City Hall. An estimated 20,000 Muslims were gathered here. But a series of clashes broke out between the Malays in the procession and Chinese bystanders. This triggered communal violence, which spread all across the island.
Racial tensions were high, shops were closed and streets were deserted. The government called for a curfew throughout the island. Mr. Bajan Singh, retired school principal and former member of the Presidential Council for Religious Harmony, lived through those challenging times in Singapore's history.
Usually I go at night at about 8+ to buy tea from the Tetari men. And there was a big kampong, a multiracial kampong of Chinese, Malay, Indians, and 20 plus Sikh families living at Palmer Road. There was a big kampong at Palmer Road. And so this Tetari man at his stall, there were 2 or 3 groups sitting and whispering, talking in a hush-hush word. And normally the atmosphere around this Tetari man stall is very jolly, very chatty. I won't call it eerie, but there was an unusual silence, Person who is selling the tea, he speaks Hindi language, And he told me there is some problem and some incident has fighting or some trouble in the Gelang Kalang area. So that's when I first heard about it.
This was by no means the only racial riots that Singapore experienced. 5 years later, in 1969, racial tensions and communal violence in Malaysia spilled over into Singapore and left 4 people dead. These were among the darkest moments in the history of modern Singapore. The challenging times in 1964 and 1969 remain fresh in the memories of those who witnessed and lived through them.
69 was a totally a different kind of thing. I was in uniform and I was doing my officer cadet training, and I remember we were all the officer cadet companies were alerted. Some training was cancelled. Field training was cancelled. I remember we had a live firing which was cancelled, and we were asked to stand by, and there was a state of alertness.
1964, 2 communal riots. And we don't pretend to ourselves that they weren't communal riots. They were. We face facts. And this is one of the greatest strengths about Singapore, its willingness to face reality.
But the reality is that memories do fade. Singaporeans have been living in peace and harmony for so long. The younger generation, unlike Mr. Bajan Singh, has not lived through communal tensions and racial and religious disharmony. When we come back, find out how a society-wide approach in Singapore has been put in place to ensure that history does not repeat itself.
Throughout the years, a myriad of initiatives and policies were conceived and implemented to build, promote, and foster the sense of unity and togetherness at all levels of Singapore society.
And for Singapore as a country to do well, we all have to work together to care for one another and to strengthen support for one another in a multiracial and multi-religious society. It will come under pressure from time to time. There will be threats to our cohesion and unity, but if we work together and we understand one another and have trust in one another, whatever the problems, whatever the pressures and threats and dangers, we will be able to hold together as one united people.
Self-help groups for each community were set up, funded and supported by the government. The election system was developed to ensure sufficient minority representation in Parliament. The Inter-Religious Organisation, or IRO, increasingly promoted interfaith cooperation and dialogue, and the Presidential Council for Religious Harmony was established.
If we could really provide a safe environment for such discussion on interfaith issues, it is already a big start and a very important platform, a unique platform that we can provide. What the IRO has is really a neutral platform for this. And not only that, we also really emphasize the common underlying values in religion. We must not forget that.
The message of social cohesion and harmony was also introduced in schools. Students and teachers of all backgrounds celebrate Racial Harmony Day to mark the day of the race riots and to appreciate each other's unique cultural traditions.
we have spent so much of our time and resources to get our people to come together, to interact and to engage. Unlike in many other countries where people stay compartmentalized, through interaction and engagement, people get to know each other. People's anxieties about each other can be lessened because they know each other. Knowledge will reduce that anxiety level.
A significant step in ensuring equality of the races was the decision to use English, Mandarin, Malay and Tamil as the official languages of Singapore.
Official messages and announcements were delivered in all 4 languages over the radio and on television. National songs in these different languages are also taught in schools and sung at community events.
The culture of unity and harmony was embodied in the National Pledge, which espouses the equality of all Singaporeans regardless of race, language or religion. The regular recitation of the pledge in schools has played a key role in inculcating the spirit of unity and a sense of national identity in the younger generation.
It's a symbol of our unity, and it represents about how we are supposed to stay together and help each other, regardless of our race or religion.
It means we should stay together in unity.
The pledge is a reflection of us, and we are Singaporeans.
We, the citizens of Singapore, pledge ourselves as one united people, regardless of race, language or religion, to build a democratic society based on justice and equality, so as to achieve happiness, prosperity, and progress for our nation.
While the Singapore story of multiculturalism is laudable, recent developments on the global stage pose significant challenges to harmony in the region and in Singapore. The waves of Islamic radicalization have reached the shores of ASEAN.
Unless we deal with that and make sure that we deal with social media and send our messages across in a way that deals with the ideology, we will lose the fight. The young are more at risk of radicalization. And therefore, we have to take special efforts to outreach to the young as a target group. We need religious authorities to step up and play an important role in countering these false ideologies, explaining why ISIS ideology goes against Islamic teachings, and raising the awareness of the community as a whole.
Discoveries of terrorist cells and training camps, as well as arrests of militants planning attacks in Singapore and in neighbouring countries, all show how real and close to home the threat is. What can each ASEAN member nation do individually and collectively to effectively address this?
We must press on to reach out to every segment of the community and speak with one rational, moderate voice against exclusivist and extremist doctrines. Such a time also calls for extra vigilance to keep our country safe and secure, whether against radical ideologies, errant preachers, or of any suspicious activities around us. We must stand as one united people and not let the radical actions of a few spread fear and suspicion among the different communities in Singapore.
The threat of terrorism, and today we're talking about ISIS terrorism, is very real, is in the region already. And one effective strategy that ISIS has always used is to weaken societies. So we have to be really on our toes and be very careful to make sure that any attempt, to divide society based on race, language, or religion will have to deal with these attempts decisively and not allow it to take root in our society anywhere in members in the ASEAN region.
While each member nation needs to find its own way to address its unique problems and challenges it faces in fostering ethnic and religious harmony, it can learn from the experiences of others through dialogue and interactions.
I believe that in a situation as complex as what we are facing today, I think you need a kind of national reconciliation. You need to have a lot of dialogue and conversations so that to find common grounds and meeting points. But I think at the ASEAN level, there could be more meeting of minds, more discussion in terms of sharing of positive experiences. You know, there are member countries which have gone through this bad patch in their history, which they have overcome. And these are wonderful cases or experiences for other member countries to adapt and adopt.
There is no doubt that racial and religious harmony in each member nation of ASEAN is the foundation for peace and stability in the region. Not only will this provide the impetus for growth and prosperity for individual countries, but the region as a whole stands to benefit collectively. It all begins with the choices each person makes in his or her interactions with another of a different language, race, or religion.
We started from Singapore, which was racially segmented. We lived in different areas in Singapore, and over the course of 50 years, we began to live together and integrated together. It was a choice that we made. And over the next 50 years, again, it is a choice that we make. Whether as communities, as individuals, we decide that we live together and integrate, or we decide that we want to be separate and live apart. And that will shape the Singapore of the future.
The aphorism, united we stand, divided we fall, is indeed most appropriate and valuable in our quest for unity, peace and harmony in Singapore as well as in the region. How ASEAN member nations are willing to sow the seeds of unity for themselves and for the region will determine how ASEAN can become the regional power it has the potential to be.